Okay. Good evening. Sorry I was a little late. Well, 6:26, I guess, at least on my watch. Got some people here. First of all, Howard Young, who is one of our speakers, and Brian Parkinson, Dr. Parkinson, is here. They're going to give their presentations on Indonesia. And also we have some guests, Jack and Francis Mennerly, who are neighbors of mine right here. And we share the same street, so I appreciate your attendance. And over here, we have Phil Smedra, who's a frequent participant in Third World Series, and just come back from China. In fact, he's going to be one of the featured speakers on a seminar in China on March 14th. It's going to be in the Education Center, 100, room 100. And Dr. Richard Hall, who's authority on Eastern European history, has published several books, both fine colleagues, and Dr. Bragg, Susan Bragg, who's a colleague also here in American history, women's history, American civil rights movement, black history. So welcome all. I passed a sign-up sheet around to see who's here, because continuing education wants to know how many people attended. So anyhow, I'm not going to go back into the history of this again. I've done that a lot. It's on the brochure. And I'll just say we've been around a long time, and I feel that, you know, we serve a purpose, try to enlighten people about most of the world. Tonight, it's Indonesia. We've never had a program on Indonesia. And we have two speakers. None of that. We've never had speakers who were married. So that's a first, too. And not only that, they just came back from Indonesia. They were there this summer visiting their parents. And she'll tell you the story of that. But it's also the first time we've ever had anyone in the Department of Music. And that is a first. But she has a, you know, international background. So that's what's germane to this program. And I just saw two of my neighbors walk in, Dr. Charles Davis and Mary Davis, his wife, and they sit right here. I appreciate that. They live right across the street from me. So, well, Miss Allen Young is no stranger to Georgia Southwestern. She's been here about 6 years. And she's a lecturer for music in Chinese language. She was born in Hong Kong and came to the United States in the year 2000, and has a background in piano, an excellent background. She studied at Hong Kong Academy for Performing Arts, had a government scholarship and won a lot of awards. Then at Florida State, she received her Master of Music degree in piano pedagogy, and also had an assistantship there. And then they came to, Brian and Alan came here in 2005, and for a while she worked at Columbus College, and then came over here and taught various classes, college class, piano, kids college class piano, continuing education, adult class piano. But she's an accomplished freelance accompanist and is familiar to many people in Americus because she is the pianist, organist at America's First Methodist Church. And I didn't know that till I read back. Well, Brian said something about you couldn't participate Wednesday because you were at church. But she's also currently pursuing her master's in Chinese at Middlebury College in Vermont. So Alan is going to speak to us about Indonesia, and she has some first-hand experiences there because her parents lived there. So please join me in welcoming her to our seminar.
Hello, good evening. How are you all today? Very good. Hey, let's have a. Today we're going to talk about Indonesia at a glance, okay? Because like so many things to talk about, but let's just talk about some general ideas. And since I'm an Indonesian-born, my parents are Indonesian-born Chinese, almost like kind of get confused with that. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about the Indonesian-born Chinese, like how is it like as an Indonesian Chinese in Indonesia, okay? But before we get started, actually, let's have a little bit quiz, about Indonesia. Wonder how much you know about Indonesia, okay? Let's see. And this is, let's see if we kind of like get it right, and let's check. It's like, today I asked some of my students, and it's like, it's tropical, okay? It's Indonesia, big country, okay. All right, now let's see what we got here. It's like from the National Geographic, and then we'll see if you can get the answers right. All right. Oh. Okay. Oops. Over here. Okay, question number 1. Which of the following animals is... Ooh, this one's popping. Which of the following animals is found only on the islands of Sumatra and Borneo? Which one do you guys think? Okay, well, let's see. Let's see if we got it right, okay? And that's like, now you know one thing about Indonesia. Oh, correct, okay? For sure, that's like the person of the forest. Like you have like those like really cute long hair, orangutan just like, living there. Okay, now let's see. Approximately half of Indonesia population lives on which island? I hear the Java. Okay, let's see if you're right. And yes, you have like over 130 million people live on the island of Java, which is like, the world's most populous island. And then you are the home of Jakarta. Okay, and when you think about it, it's like 130 million people. How big is that island? It's actually just like New York State. Okay, imagine like you have 130 million people living in New York State. And then we have the next one. Okay, they produce a very common spice. Want to make a wild guess? Which one is that? Cinnamon, nutmeg, paprika, saffron. Cinnamon. I see it here like both, like cinnamon. Well, let's see if it's a cinnamon. Okay, I did see like some cinnamon farm. Oh man, it's like nutmeg. Okay, now like a lot of time like they produce nutmeg. Maybe like in your spice cabinet, that's like the nutmegs from Indonesia, and it's like they have a lot of spice islands in Indonesia, and then that's also like where it's come from. And in Indonesia, it's actually they have for example coffee. Coffee is like cocoa beans. Like it's from a lot of them is like being produced in Indonesia. You have other like teak furniture, like when you like the tree, and then that's also like from Indonesia. A lot of them is like produced over there. Okay, it's recognized as 6 different religions, but which faith do most Indonesians associate with? Islam. Okay, very good. It's actually, they have 86% of Islamic, like they are Islam. And then they also have Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and we'll kind of like, touch a little bit of that. Okay. And we have 400 volcanoes. How many of them still active? None? Oh, okay. It's like which one? Okay. Well, let's see. We hope for the best, right? Let's see none. Well, unfortunately, it's actually you have 101 to 150 of like among all those 400 volcanoes that's still active, which is 75% of the volcanoes. It's like active in Indonesia. And you spend one day visiting each Indonesian islands. How many years do you think you have to do like to see them all? Oh wow! It was like guess. How many years do you think? Huh? How many? 48. Well, let's hope not that long. Okay, we'll see it like 48. Correct. It's actually they have like 17,000 of islands, and then like it's composed like, and that's Indonesia. And if you go like one each day, and then you have like spend 48 years. We can catch up. Okay, let's start today. All right. And then the official language of Indonesia. Japanese, Sudanese. They have like over 500 language, but only like probably 13 of them is like widely used. And actually right now is like Bahasa Indonesia is like the official language of Indonesian for the Indonesians. Okay. Okay. And they just have a change in the language for the Indonesian language. Before, like I remember when I was younger, that's like 80s, in the 1980s, and I went to Indonesia, and then I speak, pretty fluent Indonesians, and then I have no problem communicating with anyone over there. I cannot read, but then it's just like you can just like communicate with that. Indonesian is actually a very easy language to learn, and but now the last summer when I was there, and when I speak Indonesian, and then people just start laughing, and then I'm like, what's going on? What happened is the one that I speak, okay, the language that I speak is still kind of like they understand it, but what it is like it's not classy enough now. Okay, because they have a formal Indonesian language, and which is like Bahasa Indonesian, and the one that I spoke before is like from like more of a rural area, and then that's why even some workers over there, when I start talking, and then they just start laughing, and then they were like, how do you learn that like from the rural areas? And okay. Now what's 1883 events that affected world weather for 5 years? Mm-hmm. Let's see the eruption. Okay, very correct. And then that's like affected even like in Australia you can hear that. It's kind of like giving you guys a little bit idea of like Indonesia. All right. Which adventurer was one of the first explorers? I heard Marco Polo. Right. Okay. Let's see. Paula. Okay. All right. All right. Okay, yes, you are correct. Okay, it sailed to the Pacific to investigate Indonesian islands. Okay, and you can kind of like see at that time it's already converted to Islam. Okay. And pointing at objects or persons with a forefinger, like we do, it's like pointing, is considered rude in Indonesia. What do you think we should use if we're going to point in Indonesia? Not? Okay, well, let's see, what do we do? Not. That's our last one. Let's see if we got it right or not. Oh, man, it's not. We have to point with the thumb of your right hand. That means you're going to like point like this, okay? Like here, okay, there. Okay, you guys do well. Okay. Well, I guess we can view the results, okay? Let's see how we did. Pretty good, 70%. We kind of like, with a little work, you will be a pro. All right, now let's see, with our lectures today, and then see, if you can kind of know more about Indonesia. Okay, this is like the map, and as we mentioned before, you have 17,000 of islands, right? It's a huge, and then it's all spread out, and you have like, between the Indian Ocean and also Pacific Ocean, and they have the neighbors, okay, the neighboring countries. You have Australia, it's like really close. That's why sometimes people who would travel, when we were in Indonesia, a lot of Australians were there because like it's cheaper to travel. For us it would be more expensive, probably like high, like probably around 2,000 maybe like US dollars to kind of like get tickets and then go there, and it was much cheaper, from Australia. And I also would have cousins that would go to Australia to study. For college or like high school over there, rather than come to like, United States because it's much further and far from home. And you have Thailand, Cambodia, Philippines. And with the language itself, it's actually very related to the Malaysian and then also the Philippines, okay? And some of the words, like when I talk with my best friend who's from Philippines, and we will understand each other. Okay, this is the Indonesian flag, the red and white, and then the emblem. Okay, just a little bit facts about Indonesia. The capital is Jakarta, and the official language is Indonesian. You have like 17,000 islands, okay, and you have like 238 million people, which is like in the 33 provinces. I think we will be pretty surprised because when we think about Indonesia, yes, it's the developing countries. But it's actually the world's 17th largest economy by the nominal GDP, and then they have like the 15 considered as purchasing power parity. The current presidents, we kind of like mentioned over here, and then you have like the declared independence in 1945, and now with today I'm just trying to kind of like give you guys a little bit background about Indonesia. I'm not a scholar, about Indonesia, but and you might say, well, you're from Hong Kong, you're Chinese, what's happening? My parents are Indonesian-born Chinese. My grandparents, in the 2030s, like they earlier, and then they went to Indonesia from China, okay, and then they trying to kind of like make a better living at that time. And and then my parents would be like, the first generation Chinese, Indonesian-born Chinese, and that's why from my eyes, like this is like mainly it's like from how I see it, how I experience it. I went to Indonesia when I was like a little kid, and then also last year I went there like probably 3 or 4 times in my life, and I can see like the drastic change within the years. One thing as I mentioned earlier is the language itself, and then. Now you can see with Indonesia is from my presentation, you see like kind of like you see one thing is really pretty, and then suddenly you see like a big contrast of it. For example, this is like a very nice restaurant, and a lot of time like they used it's very open, because Indonesia is very hot and humid, and that's why they have like the open, and then if you use electricity, if you use AC, that's very expensive, and in here we are very spoiled, okay, that we get to have AC pretty much everywhere. But in Indonesia, it's a very expensive commodity that is not a necessity, and that's why most of the area, unless you are in a very expensive restaurant, you don't really have the AC, and then or even at home you don't use it. And you will also notice that like I may not have the most popular pictures like from Indonesia in my presentation, because from my viewpoint, I'm not exactly a tourist, going there, because my family's, I was there pretty much like few months. Combined, I probably have like a year in my whole life that I was in Indonesia, since like in my childhood and also later in my life. And then you see there's a big restaurant earlier, and then you see like a very common restaurant, okay? It's like a place that people will eat. What they would do is like, they would stop by, they would ride their bike, or they would ride on pejak. Pejak is like a tricycle, like you have from your neighborhood, because not everyone will be able to afford a car. Okay, and then sometimes it's like if you have a motorcycle, that's actually pretty good. You go to work, and then, well, how about other family members who only have like one motorcycle? The parents go to work. How about the other people? Then they will maybe like take the pejak, which is like the tricycle, and then go to the main streets, and then you can kind of like eat. You have like water, and then sometimes you will see noodle shop, and then they have like different kind of cuisine. Okay, and then you will see that over here they kind of like list up what they have. Okay, like kopi susu is like the milk coffee. Okay, the kopi. Okay. All right, and here's another thing that you will see a lot in Indonesia is that as I mentioned before, you have like one really beautiful, extravagant exhibition hall. Okay, for like some function, and then at the side of it, you have something that is just demolished or is never really even being developed. That's you see a lot in Indonesia. And we're talking about is like the trash problem. You can be having mansion like the Hamptons, okay, like those big mansions, really beautiful, and then right next to it you have like some trash pile. Because like that's the way that they handle it, and then you would wait like a little bit while, like before people can come and then kind of like move it. This is very common that you will see, okay. But this is like more like a daily life, and for sure, if in a bigger city, you're probably not going to see that. But I was there for probably 3 weeks. Okay, this time we were there 3 weeks, and then live in my relatives' homes, and then that's why like we'll be able to see like some residential area and other parts of Indonesia. And actually, Singapore export their trash to Indonesia because like they have a lot of space, and then that's one of way to make money, I guess. All right, now Indonesia, when you drive, there's almost no rules about that, okay? This is not that, okay. This is not that bad, okay? You have 3 person on a motorcycle. We saw 4 or 5. I think I saw 5. Like, one is even at the front, and then one is like hanging with the mom, That's 5, okay? And then we also seen that like, someone riding a motorcycle, and you have a badge frame around it, okay? And then it's like really, creative way to do the transportation. And when we first got there, you see like Dr. Parkinson over there with our little boy at the front seat. We will get arrested, right, in here. But over there, the first thing we ask is like, do you guys have car seat? And he's like, what car seat? And then we get in the car, and sometimes we don't even find like the seat belt, okay, because they say like, it's just like half there. I don't know why you're going to use it, just like cut it. Okay, and my boy was really happy though. Okay, and then with the transportation, it's pretty funny because like they have a lot of traffic, and you will see more motorcycle than cars. Okay, and then the way, for example, if accident happen, who's paying? Not the insurance company, because not everyone have like insurance. What happens is like the better car, the bigger car it is, pay whoever. You might be like you're not at fault, but then you're paying it because like sometimes people can't afford it, and then that's why you see those kind of things. And sometimes you wait for the lights for almost like 2 minutes, 120 seconds. You'll see the seconds tick off. Like from 100, 99, 98. Okay, and you have to wait for that. Hey, this is a museum that we went to, and it's a secret museum, and it's a big family. And then what they did is like they make a lot of money, and then from the cigarette company, and then they do a lot of charity work and in education and in other parts. And this is the museum to kind of like honor the company. And over here, with the dress, it's a very traditional Indonesian's outfit, okay, and as you see now, okay, this is like batik, okay, like what I'm wearing, and also what Dr. Parkinson's wearing, and this is like a fabric, a special fabric that they use handmade, like manual they dye their fabric, and then with the patterns, and with different patterns, and you can tell, like, from which area. And before they have those batik is like usually from Jogja and then Surakarta, and they have some of them, like is representing like different colors representing different gods in the Hindu. Like for example, the indigo, dark brown, and white, represent the three major Hindu gods. And sometimes like the pattern itself show that where you're from, and then whether you're a noble or not. I have no clue if I'm I'm a peasant girl, or like, if I'm from the middle class, okay? But let's hope that it's like, noble. Okay, and they have own unique patterns. Like sometimes it's flowers, nature, animals, people. And you also see like, different ones, like for example, the dress, like the stationaries, like, I mean, for sure this will be the souvenir. You have the arts, okay? Like this kind would be like the arts. Here, okay, all this like a lot of time is like handmade. That's why it's very expensive. And also one thing that is very popular in Indonesia is sarong. Okay, and I think a lot of people just use that the cloth, like going to the beach, like just kind of like wrap it. But that cloth is very popular. If you look in Indonesia, a lot of people wearing it because it's so hot and humid. That the fabric itself is very comfortable, and then it's also usually it's like a little bit big. They don't want to make it tight. It's big, and then kind of like more area, And you see people like weaving and then dyeing the fabric. Okay, this is like how people like. There are people over here. If you can see, is they in the more rural area, they like kind of like hold their products and then trying to sell. To tourists. Okay, I think we were in Bali at that time, and every spot, like when you get off the car, and then you have people that was trying to sell you things, like some souvenirs, and it's really beautiful. It's like handmade, handcrafted. Is very, very nice. Okay, here is like the traditional dance, the Balinese dance, okay, and then also you have gamelan here, and we're going to like kind of like listen to it. And this is a very, very traditional music in Indonesia, and you have the gamelan itself is almost like our orchestra, the Western orchestra, but what they have is the tuned percussion instruments, and we're going to listen to it, and then if you are in my music appreciation class, this probably you will hear that. Or how can I kind of get the, can I do this? Okay. And you can tell that this is a melodic instrument, and then some of them is like just for accompaniment. And the melody itself is everything is continuous. Once they started, the melody continues. It's just like evolved. And the gong itself is like the gamelan itself is like more predates the Hindu Buddhist culture that dominated Indonesia in the earliest record. The gamelan itself, like we kind of like believe, is like it was created for a signal to summon the gods, okay? And then the gong itself is like that's what they kind of like present. And if you have more complex message, you will have two gongs, and then that's kind of like set the set of it. And like for the whole time, it's just like kind of like keep switching, keep changing the melodies, and it's get more exciting as I keep. And you will reach a climax, and then afterwards it's kind of like, go back to like, it's calm down at the end. And it's very interesting, to see that. And with the gamelan music, a lot of time before it's like for ceremonial purposes. Okay. I really like it. And then you have the dance. Okay, that one was just the pure music itself, and then we have the gong dance. And all the dance have the story about it. Like sometimes it's what the evil spirit, sometimes it's like welcome, sometimes it's celebration. Okay, and what they have is like this one is just like a duet, a dance. But you will look at the details, okay, of how she dress and how they dress, and then also from the eyes. Okay, the eyes is very important. The hand gestures, the movements. Sometimes you will have like animals coming out, and then they, it's more animated, and then it's like different style of the music, and then you can kind of like check it, which is like the greatness of YouTube. You can check that. And then when you think about Balinese music or like Indonesian music, we think like, well, that is so old, like it's like very traditional, but it's actually very important to the Western music world too, because like in 1889 Paris exhibition. Okay, and it's introduced, like a lot of different kind of instruments is being introduced in Paris, which is, that's the first time almost that you have instruments from other countries, in Paris. And like, for example, Debussy will got inspired and then wrote some of his music. And then also like we have the American composer, John Cage, and his Sonata 5 for the prepared piano. And if you listen to it, you will be able to kind of like hear it. It's very similar, the way that it is. Oh, oops, wrong link. Pardon me. Excuse me for that. And let's listen to this very quick. And if you just close your eyes, you might be like, oh, that's just gamelan music, right? And then you open your eyes like, what is it? It's just piano. The way is like how they set up, and it's like they prepare piano and imitate the gamelan music. Okay, and it's very interesting for that. And that's why you can see like, Indonesian music is, is in Western music world too. Okay, and also you can see like this is when we talk about volcanoes, and this one, fortunately, this is the not active anymore. Okay, but you can still see, like the volcano, like the ashes and everything. And here is the rice terrace, and I think it's really beautiful. This one, when we were there, it's already been harvested. That's why it's not like as lush. And in Indonesia, they have a lot of natural resources. For example, they can mine, and then the minerals, and a lot of different kind of like limestone, and then make paper and other products. Okay, you will see like this part will be the mountains, and on the other side will be the ocean. Okay, and this one is the seaweed farm. Okay, that's how people make their money, and then they also will have the seafood they catch. The rice terrace itself. Okay, this one is more like the whole field is just gorgeous, and then the lake. Just trying to show you, and this is more of the rural area, and you can see it's like kind of like they are building their communities like through the hill. Okay, and this is like a more of kind of like not the main street. And you have a lot of like snacks, the vendors, and this is the pajak that we mentioned earlier, pajak, and people were just like waiting for the customers, like the taxi we have, okay, and getting ready for a ceremony. Okay, and in Indonesia they have diverse, religion, and you have the Hindu, and then you have different religion, and as much as the 86% is like Islam, but then here you have a Chinese mosque, okay, and one of the mosques in Duban, okay, and when they were praying, and you can see kind of like just a glimpse of how it's really beautiful architecture in there. And then you have like ceremonies, some other ceremonies. Okay, and when you are going to visit some temples, you have to wear the sarong, okay, to pay to be more to be respectful. Okay, and this is the way that they kind of like worship their god. Okay, like in certain times, and they have flowers, they have little food, water, and this is like for going to the temple, you have to really. Make sure you don't break any of the rules, okay? For that, like don't wear short pants, short skirts to go there, and then some other things that just make sure you have to pay attention. All right, and this is like part of the ritual. They're trying to cleanse themselves before they pray. Okay, that's my family, and then you see like the architecture itself is really pretty. The temple right next to the ocean. Okay, this is like the god Garuda. And you also have like the airline, Garuda airline, and then this is the museum. They are going to build a museum. And when we visited, when we were there, they told us that this one, when they are finished, is going to be taller than the Statue of Liberty. Okay, and we'll see, like maybe a few years, they might be finished. This is a Chinese temple. Okay, and it's very interesting. Sometimes you will see a mosque, a temple, a Chinese temple, and you have like a church. All on one street, okay, and or like in a community, and then they are in harmony, okay, and then that's the church, and you see like the gong over there, okay. It's like they also have like some traditional music in there. For example, they the way that we were there for the wedding, okay, and my cousin Christians, and then they will have English words like combined with like some Indonesians, and then that's how a lot of time they communicate like this. All right, the batik. Let's talk about the Chinese Indonesians. Like when we are just only 2.9% of the population, but it actually dominates the whole country economy. Okay, and I'm not saying that like most Asians over there or most Chinese Indonesians, they are wealthy, but then some of them they also will be like in the farmers in other fields, but then a lot of them are in the business field. Okay, and then they have staff, that work for them. Okay, for example, like when they're working, they have the staff to take care of the house, take care of like the family. Okay, and we have like this is our tour guide, and then he's the Muslim, and then he is very friendly, and then we talk about religion, and then I think when we think about the region, we say, oh, there must be a lot of conflicts, you might have a lot of arguments. In certain way, it's not. It's like they're all in harmony, and which we appreciate, like in the workplace, and you can see that. And with the Chinese over there, they were there for a long time, and it's very interesting dynamic in there, because in Indonesia, like for example, they have like anti-Chinese and the culture over there, but at the same time, they also are the one who like support the economy, who provide jobs and everything. And I think main thing is like in Chinese, the Indonesian Chinese, when they are there, they don't forget their they are Chinese, okay. But what happens is like they embrace the whole culture itself. And when they are there, they think about themselves as an Indonesian, and then also, just like they also have the background of like they are being a Chinese. That's why one thing that I really like about the motto of like Indonesia is like unity in diversity. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Adler is here. I just saw him come in. He's our Dean, Vice President for Academic Affairs. And Bill Harris is here, Cooperative Coffees who helps the small coffee producer market their coffee at a fair price, and Millie Cohn, I believe, is here. Okay, well, our next speaker is Brian Parkinson, who has been here since 2005. He got his BA degree from Georgia Southern University, got his MA and PhD from Florida State University, taught at Florida State in Tallahassee, taught at Florida State Center in London, and he's published many articles. He teaches courses on Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and he's had grants and scholarships, Fulbright Scholarship to South Africa, and also he's a member of an independent think tank in Washington, and he keeps up with his studies. He visited Turkey to study the Turkish language at a Turkish university in 2010, and he and Alwyn visited Indonesia. And I'd just like to say when I retired in 2005, he took my position. And I think he's done an excellent job in it. And I appreciate everything that he's doing in third world studies. So, Dr. Parkinson, talk on you.
Hey, how y'all doing? How do I get this to go back? Yeah, I want to use that map. Ignore the pictures of me. That'd be far too easy for me to do that. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. Trying to get the map. Dun, dun, dun. Can I just escape? Thank you. All right. Okay. No. All right. So what I'm going to talk about today is the religion of Islam in Indonesia. And what I'm going to try and do is give you a little bit of background about Islam in Indonesia, as well as do a little bit of comparison and contrast with Islam in the Middle East. Yeah, awesome. So, I spent some time in Lebanon in the Arab world. I studied Arabic there. I spent some time in Istanbul in the Turkic world, and I studied Turkish there. And I've been to Indonesia, and the Islam there is very different from Islam and in the Middle East, in the Arabic world, and Turkic world. Islam there is much, much more laid back, much, much more relaxed. The differences are quite stark, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, when Hillary Clinton was doing one of her tours as Secretary of State, and she was in Indonesia, she said that if Americans or the world could learn Islam, she hopes they would learn it from Indonesia. All right. So, as my wife said, Indonesia is a Muslim country. It is the most populous Muslim country on earth. It has over 200 million people, and the majority of them being Muslim. They practice the Sunni form of Islam, which is the Orthodox version of Islam, as compared to Shia Islam, which is schismatic or heterodox, whichever you want to call it. In Orthodox Islam, you basically read the Quran and you interpret it. Well, you don't interpret it. You read it literally, and that's how it is. You don't interpret. That's the important thing. But there are two main kinds of Sunni Muslims within Indonesia, and it's more. This is more of a mental thing for them. There are those that are modernist, and the modernist Indonesians generally are Orthodox in their theology, but they believe in modern learning, modern education, okay? And then you have those who are considered traditionalist. And those Muslims in Indonesia are actually more likely to follow ulama, Islamic clergy, that interpret the Quran. In Arabic, that word is ijtihad, and that is usually something that you see in Shia Islam, but in this case, you have Sunni Muslims or Sunni clerics interpreting the Quran. All right, and these who are, I think, a minority of Muslims in Indonesia, they are considered the traditionalists. All right. So how did Indonesia become a Muslim country? There are basically two ways or routes of transmission in Islam for a place to be Islamicized. All right. And one route or method of transmission is conquest. And you'll see coming out of the Arab Peninsula in the 600s and 700s, armies conquering North Africa, the Middle East, up into Central Asia. And so that's one way Islam expands. That is not the way that Islam expanded into Indonesia. Indonesia received Islam through commerce, through trade. You had Muslim merchants, Muslim traders showing up in Indonesia wanting to trade for spices and bringing their religion with them. Prior to these merchants showing up in Indonesia, Indonesia was a predominantly Hindu and Buddhist country. All right, and when is this taking place? Well, there's a lack of documents from the earliest expeditions in which these travelers or merchants showed up in Indonesia, although we do have some accounts from famous travelers who showed up in Indonesia and said, oh, this is a Muslim country. My wife mentioned one of them, Marco Polo. We also have grave sites that show in Indonesia when you visit graves, and my wife and I, we visited the graves of her grandparents. It'll tell you or show you what religion they are on the grave, on the gravestone, on the marker. And so you can look at the dates and it'll show, the crescent moon for Muslims. And so some people say it arrived there as early as the 10th century, the 900s, but it really didn't take foot until the 1300s. All right. Marco Polo went there. Some people even said Ibn Battuta, who was a famous Muslim traveler. He's the Islamic version of Marco Polo. All right. And eventually Islam will supplant Hinduism and Buddhism in Indonesia. And the path or the trajectory that it takes is from west to east. And so what happens is you have a slow process of Islamization. You don't have Arabization. They're not Arabs. They don't speak Arabic. I know this because when I went to some mosques, I don't speak very good Indonesian. I thought, oh, I can converse with these guys in Arabic. Their Arabic's not that good. They know some, but you really can't converse with them in Arabic. And what they know is kind of this classical Quranic Arabic, which might have flown in the 700s, but not today. It's kind of like trying to read Chaucer today without the footnotes. All right. And I guess also trying to read something that's written in stream of consciousness at the same time. Okay, so you have this west to east movement of Islam, and one of the interesting things that happens is the Hindus who don't want to convert, the Buddhists who, mainly Hindus actually, who don't want to convert to Islam, they actually end up on the island of Bali. Bali is almost all, 95% Hindu, whereas the rest of Indonesia is, what'd you say, 86% Muslim, okay? All right, and East Timor is Catholic, and it's about what? I'd say 10, 11% Christian / Buddhist. The older generation are usually Buddhist Chinese, and the younger ones are Christian Chinese. So like all of her cousins are Christian, but their parents are all Buddhist. Is that how it rolls?
People have, they have the Buddhist statue in the house, and then the kids
So it's a nice amalgam or mixture or blending of religion. All right, and that's actually really interesting because what you end up with is this mixing of all the religious faiths. Indonesia is very tolerant of other religions. They kind of need to be. All right. So that's how Islam ended up in Indonesia. What was it like later on in history? For example, in the colonial period, during the period of colonism and imperialism, Indonesia was under the control of the Dutch. All right, and what happens in Indonesia is a process that I've seen over and over and over in imperial or colonial history, and that is Muslims use Islam as a political tool, as a force to try and unify the people against the colonizer. All right, so it was used as a rallying point against the colonizer. All right, and many Indonesians were actually inspired by a famous Egyptian Muslim theologian, a guy named Muhammad Abduh. Muhammad Abduh was a disciple of a guy named Jamaluddin al-Afghani, and both of these guys promoted a political form of Islam known as Pan-Islam, where they wanted to unite all the Islamic world together against the imperialists. It's kind of this East versus the West dynamic. All right. What's interesting is while Muhammad Abduh, his teachings become very popular in Indonesia, where these guys, they follow Pan-Islam, it's us versus the colonizer. They also follow his teachings about religious tolerance. Okay? Muhammad Abduh was a guy who preached in Egypt about the value of treating Christians and Jews with tolerance. Okay? And so that's picked up or well received in Indonesia, which already had a history of tolerance. Okay. And so let's move into the post-independence period. This is from 1945 to the present. What has been the trend in Islam there in Indonesia since 1945? You actually have a trend towards more orthodox Islam. And I think that's partially a product of mass communication. They had, in Indonesia, prior to more mass communication, they had forms of Islam that blended many local traditions, local elements, native elements, if you will, into their religion. And so you've had a trend towards a more, I don't want to say stricter version of Sunni Islam, but more orthodox. All right. And also you've had a conflict in Indonesia over where should Islam be in terms of its role in the government and in civil society. And Indonesia has made a conscious choice that their society should be a secular one, and the government should be a secular government, not influenced by Islam. Although you have a lot of members of parliament who describe themselves as Muslims, but they're not going to go out and advocate a return to the caliphate. Okay? All right. So, and what I'm going to do now is end with a discussion about how they practice Islam in Indonesia and compare that to my experiences in places like Beirut, Lebanon, and Istanbul, Turkey. It's a much less strict form of Islam. When I lived in Lebanon, most of the Muslims there covered their heads, the females, that is. They veiled. In Turkey, it's kind of a split society. You have the secularists who are liberal and don't really want to cover up, and you have the conservatives who are traditional and do cover up. And but in Indonesia, you do not see a large percentage of women covering up. You don't. It's heavily influenced by Sufism. Sufism is mystical Islam, all right? And it's just like mystical Christianity. There are famous Christian mystics like Hildegard of Bingen, German mystic, and it's a mystical form of religion like Kabbalah, brought to you by Britney Spears and Madonna. Yeah, all right. Oh, all right. All right, so, but what's interesting about Sufism is Sufism appeals to people who don't like the strictures and the rigor of Islam, who read the Quran and say, ooh, this is kind of strict. Where's the love? And so what Sufis do is they concentrate on forming a more perfect union or whole union with God based on love. All right. And one of the things that Sufism has a tendency to do, whether it's in Central Asia, in the Middle East, or in Indonesia, is it will blend Islamic elements with local native elements. Local traditions are blended into Islam. All right. And so what you have in Indonesia is 86% of the population who call themselves Muslim, but if you ask them further, you'll find out they might not be what you thought a Muslim is or should be. A lot of people are actually one of two other things that aren't really exactly Muslims, even though they might self-identify as Muslims. One of the things is people who practice Javanism. It's a tradition on the island of Java, where my wife's family is from. They're actually from Surabaya, which is up here. All right. Actually, that's where your daddy's from, right? Mama is from Malang, which is countryside. That's where my wife speaks Bahasa Java and not Bahasa Indonesia. Bahasa Jawa, sorry, not Bahasa Java. All right. So what is Javanism? Javanism is a mix or a blending of Islam and local or historical Hindu and Buddhist elements. Okay. And so, for example, I saw a great example of, I just said, for example, I saw a great example. That was awesome. All right, so proud. My wife and I, we visited some Muslim saints' shrines. And if you know anything about Islam, that's not proper Islam. In Islam, you don't deify saints. You don't sanctify people, okay? You don't really have hagiographies in Islam, okay? Because what you're doing is you're taking away from the awesomeness of God when you revere saints' shrines. But in Indonesia, you will find many, many people who think of themselves as good, proper, practicing Muslims at these saint shrines. Do you remember the saint shrines? Okay, yeah. And most of these saint shrines are actually found in Java, and there's 9 of them in East Java, and these 9 saints are like 9 of the first, I think, dozen or so people who brought Islam to Indonesia. Okay? And so you see that, and you also see Kabatinan, which is Sufist, and it's an amalgamation of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islamic beliefs. And even the president of Indonesia practices this. And it's almost, if I was going to make a comparison or an analogy to Christianity, it's almost like Unitarianism, where you kind of recognize one supreme God, but you don't say that there's one particular prophet that you have to follow or messenger. There's not one sacred text that you have to follow. It's very open, okay? It's almost Unitarian Islam, all right? It's very interesting. It's very different. And if you question people about Islam, not question, I'm interrogating you about Islam. If you ask people about your average Indonesian about Islam, you'll find that they really don't know that much about the religion. They'll say, oh, I'm a Muslim because my parents were Muslim. But they really don't know that much about the religion. It's, more, I would say, something more cultural in Indonesia than religious practice. Okay. Any questions? Harry, should I open the floor to questions? All right, so you can direct some questions at me if you'd like. Yes.
Two questions. What happened during World War II? Was this taken over by the Japanese? Or?
I'll let Dr. Hall, who's fortunately here, answer that question.
Okay, well,
I think the Japanese had it for a while, and I think it was eventually surrendered by the Japanese. Is that right, Richard? Yes. Yes.
this is where all the oil was or something? What was that?
It's not that oil rich. I think they do have a lot of minerals there. Actually, her family is in. Her family made their money in consulting for mineral companies, mining companies.
All right, second question is East Timor tigers. Now, I know that periodically...
The Tamil tigers are in India.
In India?
Yeah, they're in Sri Lanka. No, that's Sri Lanka. You're thinking of East Timor, and they had a civil war or a fight, and East Timor went independent, I believe, under Clinton, actually with his help. He helped negotiate it. Clinton did.
That was in India then?
Yeah. Any questions for her? Yes, no, maybe. It's never maybe. Yes, Dr. Smedra.
Actually, my question kind of goes along with the other fellow's question about independence movements. Timor-Leste,
Yes.
which was given independence,
Yeah.
I think in 1999,
Mhm.
and also there's a big independence movement on Irian Jaya to be free of Indonesian rule.
Right.
Based on
Yeah. Papua. Isn't that what we call it? Papua New Guinea?
Papua New Guinea is
Papua.
an independent country
Yes.
on the island
Yeah.
of Papua.
Right,
Which,
the-
which is the big island.
Right.
That we're looking at the right of the map there.
Yeah, the people of Irian Jaya do want independence
One
because...
independence, and my question is, given the heterogeneity of the country,
Yeah,
and how many islands? 17,000 islands?
yeah.
Why don't more people want independence from, the central government in Jakarta?
That's a good question. Okay, I'll try and give a short answer to that. So the question was, why don't more islands or peoples want independence from the central government?
I understand why small islands don't.
Yeah.
But why don't,
Yeah.
like Java?
Right.
Or,
Why doesn't Vermont want independence?
well, Vermont is a tiny little state. and
Exactly.
It relaxed on its own.
Exactly.
They're, the island of Borneo.
Yeah, okay. All right, so for the Irian Jaya, some of these, Irian Jaya is very rich in resources. It's got lots of mineral resources, and a lot of mining companies are from Java over there exploiting these mineral resources. And so they say, look, we're not benefiting from what's underneath our ground. These people from Java are benefiting from it. And so they are actually not too happy about that. And I've talked to one of your cousins. He's a consultant to mining operations. He's younger than me. And he has to fly back and forth all the time. And whenever he's over in Irian Jaya, the people that work there, they have like armed guards there, I guess, to protect not only the resources but the personnel as well. But actually, I'm not so sure that there are too many independence-minded folk in Indonesia, other than what I've heard of in Irian Jaya. Maybe they think they don't have the resources and they need Jakarta. I'm not sure.
Well, what if I don't want to interrupt anybody's
Yeah.
question. What keeps the country together?
Well, when I teach Middle East, I always say that there's this concept in Arabic, and I'll just describe it to you all in English. Basically, it provides unity to a people, the consciousness of a people. And what the government has done since 1945 is provide this kind of consciousness to the people by saying, we're a predominantly Muslim country. We all speak Bahasa Indonesia. That my wife was discussing that earlier. That's where People don't really speak the dialects as much as they used to. And so there's this effort to nationalize and bring the people together and wipe out the dialects. And so I think you've had a kind of statist effort to do that. Bill?
Just to point out, there was the independence movement in Aceh.
Oh, Banda Aceh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Northern, my friend.
Yeah.
Tsunami.
Yeah, right. Banda Aceh is right up there, right? Yeah, and that got hit by the tsunami that also hit Thailand up there, and it just leveled the place. And the sad thing, and actually a lot of the independence movement has kept going because the people of Banda Aceh feel cheated by their government because tons and tons of foreign aid came into Indonesia after the tsunami, and that money went to people with connections in the Jakarta government to rebuild it, and not to the locals on the ground. And so they haven't seen much tangible evidence of improvement. Some people have gotten rich on American altruism. Northern Europe gave lots of money to Banda Aceh, lots of euros, and it's gone into the deep pockets of rich guys. Yeah. So yeah, there is a lot of income. There's a lot of income inequality in Indonesia. There is a growing middle class, but middle class by Indonesian standards is not that means you own a motorcycle that you can put your family on. Yes.
What's the government structure like? Is it separate from island to island, or?
Actually, I don't. What is it separate? I don't know because I've only really been on Java and Bali, but it's. I don't know like how centralized it is. I don't.
What's the structure of the government?
I mean, it's like it is a democracy. It is a democracy. Yeah. Yes.
My experience in a Muslim country is totally different from what you're discussing it now.
Yeah.
And I lived in Riyadh.
Yes. Riyadh is going to be.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
The whole country shuts down when it's time to pray.
Yeah. In parts of Beirut, where I lived in Beirut, usually poor, less wealthy, less affluent areas of town. Most people will make the prayers, but nothing shuts down. But I've had this philosophy that the closer you are to the city of Mecca, the more strict the brand of Islam is. And the farther you get from it, the more relaxed. But, Pakistan and Afghanistan might be outliers there.
When it was time to pray, the whole country in the mosques and the horns goes off.
Yeah.
And it was like just.
Well, yeah, Alan, they have their muezzins, they're called to prayer, but like the whole country doesn't shut down.
I was there for 45 days doing nothing during Ramadan and Hajj.
Right.
Doing nothing, just sitting there.
Yeah. Which, depending on what time Ramadan happens, you might not be doing anything anyway, because when I was in Istanbul, Ramadan happened in the middle of summer, and it was hot, and people were tired and just lying down under trees, but you're not supposed to fall asleep because that's kind of cheating. No napping. No napping. When you're hungry and tired, no napping. That's too easy. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question for Alwyn Young. The Chinese community in Indonesia, have they basically hung together, or have they integrated with the native Indonesian? Have they intermarried with the native Indonesian
Yes,
population?
they have their groups of like the Chinese have together, the more alike they're together. But at the same time, for example, like my family and my cousins will be marrying Indonesian, the natives ones, and then like my uncle had 2 Indonesian wives. Okay, and that's how and you can see it's kind of like they integrate together with that. And
Your uncle has 2 Indonesian wives?
yes.
Player.
Oops, I hope like he's not gonna see that. But then with but that's when we have like the big gathering together, we don't see any difference. Like when you see it's just like a big family. You don't think that this part of my family is Chinese, this one is like Indonesian, and then I think
So polygamy is legal in Indonesia?
not exactly.
Ignored. Overlooked.
Yeah, I guess it's like mistress or something like that. But you have part of it. Yeah. But you know, they have you know, they have the Chinese and the Indonesian is like, you know, they work really well together in certain ways, but at the same time, you know, some people will say like, okay, Chinese make the money, you know, out of the people, and then, you know, that's why the 1998 the massacre.
Tell them about how at the feast they had both Muslim ceremonies and Christians at the house.
Oh, and then I've been told. Okay, they said like, you know, with that in mind, like, you know, a lot of people do have you know, disgruntled to the Chinese sometimes, but depends on the family. Okay, because I have people ask me about the situation in 1998. We were really concerned. You know, the world was really concerned about what's going on. But at the same time, you know, when I call my family, because they don't have any problem, they said like, yeah, it's a little bit, you know, uneasy, like the situation is getting tense, but because they are very tight with the the community itself, like, you know, their staff actually protect them. They like, you know, if there's anything, that's why I think it's like, it depends on the family. You know, sometimes when you see the news and it's different, you know, in the real life situation. And Dr. Parkinson was asking me to mention about like in weddings, you know, you try to have two different kinds of ceremony. You have the Christian one, and you see like, you know, one of my slides is like God bless, you know, and it's in the church. And then you also have the one at home, you know, like more of like the Muslim ritual.
They have,
Yeah.
they have for like the wedding. We went to her cousin's wedding, which is the most elaborate thing I've ever seen in my life. Over the top would be an understatement. But they had at her uncle Juju's house. He's the player.
No, that's my second uncle.
Oh no, sorry, that's right.
Oh,
It's the one in
something
Jakarta. All right. So I thought he's got 3 wives.
No.
Okay. So
Stop revealing my family.
all right. He's the black sheep, by the way. All right. So they had like 2 different pre-wedding parties. They had a Muslim wedding feast,
Yeah.
and they had a like traditional Indonesian wedding feast, which is non-religious.
Yeah, and because the food itself, you know, like
Right, the food was
different.
halal.
And then that's why you have like some people, which is like the friends and the relatives, like, you know, who not Muslim.
Yeah.
Muslim, and then you have like the other one, you know, at the same night, you know, like you have like 2 different kind of like area, so that you have your staff and then or like your other friends, like that they will have another feast, you know, in the same house, and then they come like go around like 2 different places. Yeah.
Chinese people love their pork.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
So does the clash of, is it a really big clash of religion between Muslims?
I think in Indonesia, whenever you have outbreaks of violence, it's usually small groups of people who are fanatical, and it's usually pretty minimal. But what they do is they make a lot of noise when they do stuff. Like I remember, so we had a Bali bombing.
2002.
And that blew up a hotel that had a lot of Australians in it, so it made the world news. Those were a few individuals acting, not like huge. I mean, most Indonesians were against that. Obviously, Indonesia gets a lot of money from tourism. The last thing they want is this to make the world news. Secondly, there was a bombing at Borobudur. If you know what Borobudur is, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's like one of the coolest places on the planet, and it's a ancient Hindu temple. And there was a bombing there done by one guy who tried to blow up a bunch of the stupas on it. And so this guy's still in jail. So guys that commit these crimes are persecuted very harshly in Indonesia. Indonesia goes after radical clerics and jails them. The last thing Indonesia wants is an Islamist movement that will upset normalcy and their path towards, I guess, economic improvement. Because, I mean, if you're a businessman, do you want to go invest in a place that has a problem with Islamic extremism? No.
And even for the private sector, for example, if you go to a shopping mall, which is usually, the top 10%, like if you're wealthy or that, or other, visitors, from Indonesia will go there. And when you drive in, you have guards that using those scanner, like trying to make sure that there's no bomb. It's like, they check. A hotel, like Sheraton Hotel, or any other places, like, they will have like guards and ask, check who's in the car, who are you? Are you staying there? Just want to make sure the safety, just kind of like, make sure nothing's going,
Do you have more than one wife?
No.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Any more? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Oh, if you're my students, meet me up here and you can sign your name and I'll give you all some extra credit.
Extra.
Yeah.
Just kidding.